Hello, everybody. Today on Spinnovation, our guest is Jenny Gustafsson from SAAB. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
You have what I think many people will think is quite a cool, interesting title, which is investment manager at SAAB.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have you here at Spinnovation because we have met a couple of times before, and I'm amazed by the way you guys work in terms of venture building and spinning out companies based on technologies that you have. But maybe we should start a little bit with sort of like what kind of a company SAAB is. I guess internationally SAAB is or was renowned for their excellent cars, but you don't make cars anymore, right?
No, we don't make cars. I still get that sometimes when I'm out internationally speaking. But no, SAAB, the car company and the defense company was in the same group a while back, but since the early 90s, they separated. So I'm a part of SAAB, the defense company.
So it's almost been 30 years without any car manufacturing, but instead you make other quite sophisticated technology.
Yeah, and we're mostly known for our fighter jets, but we make so much more. We have radar systems, we have surveillance systems, we have submarines, everything. So it's a very technology focused company with a lot of high tech.
And you have been there for how many years?
I joined SAAB back in 2010.
So we are now, since we're doing this in 2021, you've been there now
so
for
11
more
years,
than 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always assume when I hear someone that has been working at a place longer than, let's say, 3 years, it must be a good place to work at.
Yeah, and we'll get into that later, but it's constantly new companies and new projects we are working on. So it doesn't feel like I've been at the same place almost.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and I guess that helps them that it never really gets routine in that sense.
No, never.
But how I imagine that if I would like to become an investment manager at a high tech company, and we're talking really high bleeding tech. How bleeding edge tech? What do I need to know to actually even come for a job interview for that position?
Well, we're a team and we complement each other. So none of us that's worked with SAAB Ventures has ever had the same type of CV. But we're looking very much for hands-on experience, people that have built businesses or been a part of entrepreneurship projects that knows what it takes to actually take it from an idea and form a company.
And in terms of you, I mean, what's your educational background? Because I think you have a little bit of both technology and finance in your backpack, so to speak.
Well, for me, I'm not an entrepreneur, so my colleagues sort of makes up for that part of our experience. I originally from Linköping, and I'm currently back in Linköping now because SAAB has a huge site here. But after I graduated, I went up to Stockholm, started studying law, and then I also started at Stockholm School of Economics. So that's sort of my background within finance and law. But I've spent all of my career evaluating and working with new technologies, but it's so exciting. So usually I can sort of grasp the technical concepts at a high level, what you can use them for, and then the basic, like how it actually works, the mathematics behind it. Usually I can grasp that too. But then when it comes to concept design and what you have to be an engineer to do that. But
Yeah.
it's so much fun to get to learn so much about technology.
Yeah, I can only imagine, but also with sort of like being equipped with both legal knowledge as well as financial knowledge. I'm pretty sure that's a very good thing to have
Yeah.
in your line of work. And I guess we're not wrong in saying that the way you guys work, I mean, it's not unusual. It's probably some other companies that are doing this, but it's not a super common practice either, right?
No, not here in Sweden. We're quite unique in that way. In the US, there's a couple of other corporate venture that focuses on spinning out. But I believe that more companies could and should do this.
Yeah, and I'm sure you as listeners, you will understand, I think, when Jenny explains some of the cases and what the method sort of like is like, you'll probably get inspired to do stuff like this yourself if you haven't already. So, but okay, let's start at the sort of like the core of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So it's all based around IPs and technologies that you already have, right, within SAAB.
Yeah. Yeah. So SAAB Ventures has been active for 20 years now, and we've done about 40 investments, and the majority of those are spin-outs, where we either take mature SAAB technology into new markets, or in some cases, it's been employees that had ideas that didn't really fit into the SAAB strategy. But we prefer to do the first and actually start outside in. Go out into the market, find a problem or a challenge, and then go inside and see, okay, do we have technologies or that could be the solution or part of the solution? And then start testing. And if it goes well, form a company, bring in investors, management, and then eventually, as any venture capital company, sell the company.
And I guess for many it makes sense. It's not a complicated process, but there is you can go about that in kind of like different ways, and some ways that are more smart than others. But let's just touch upon sort of like going out and finding needs that your technology can solve. That is not as easy as it sounds, right?
No, it's not. And the inflow that we get is either through our own networks, me and my colleagues, or sometimes we have entrepreneurs or other companies contacting SAAB and they get funneled sort of to us, and we start a discussion.
And so how did it all start? Or if you take one of your earlier projects, what was it about? And can you tell us that story?
Yeah, the origin of SAAB Ventures actually started when SAAB merged with Celsius, another large company. And within Celsius, they had a lot of sort of things in their portfolio that didn't really fit strategically within SAAB. So they started selling off those and actually saw that this is good business. And then they went inside and saw, okay, do we have anything else that is a bit odd? And they actually found a couple of skunk projects. Nowadays, it's not very popular to talk about skunk projects, but back then there were a couple of them. So they started working with them with business development and saw, okay, this is really something. And we had very good support by a visionary person in the management of SAAB. That's sort of the father behind everything.
Yeah.
And then we started working, developing our methods and our processes, and have continued since then.
And one of the technologies that you have spun out, it's a technology that actually a lot of people have been using, knowingly or not.
Yeah, we've done a lot within image processing. So SAAB has a technology where you use two cameras. It's called stereo camera. And just like a human person has two eyes, you can get a three-dimensional view of the world, and you can get the X, Y, Z coordinates of each pixel, so you can measure within the image. So we've done a lot of spin-outs on that one, and the most well-known right now is C3 Technologies that we sold off 10 years ago with great profit. I'm not allowed to say.
All right, okay.
Everyone can Google and sort of find out, but I'm still not allowed to say who the buyer is.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't trying to trick you. I just didn't know that it wasn't really maybe public in that sense.
Yeah. But it was sold to a company where a lot of consumers use it.
And it's used for basically for their map services, right?
Yeah, map service.
Yeah.
So you get a three-dimensional map of the world.
Yeah, almost. Is that where your painting in the background comes from? Oh.
No, unfortunately not. It's completely different. Those maps look a little bit more realistic.
Maybe the next application area is 3D paintings from your technology. No, but this was also sort of like this is kind of like the technology that keeps on giving, right?
Yeah, we've had multiple spin-offs based on the same technology, and SAAB still uses the technology for its own needs and markets. And each company has a license in which field of use they can use it. So that's sort of one thing that you really have to think about early on when you set up a company, that you have to have a wide enough field of use that you can create a prosperous company, but narrow enough both so they can focus, because that's one of the key aspects in any startup, to focus, but also so we can create new spin-offs.
And so walk us through, tell us a little bit about the different kind of application areas that you have found so far with this technology.
Yeah, right now we have 3 companies in our portfolio that is using the same technology. The one that is the most mature is called Sind. They are located in Jönköping, and they use the technology to measure how much timber are on timber trucks and how much is on a pallet within logistics. So they have had an amazing journey and an amazing team, and we're still a large owner of the company, and we see a great potential for them in the future.
And I was kind of like a bit blown away by the way the forestry industry and the paper industry, you could say, the wooden manufacturing industry, how they sort of like had solved the problem of measuring how much timber there actually is on a truck, and it turns out that we here in Sweden there is actually almost like a guild with people, I imagine, mostly men, maybe traveling around and basically in person on location, taking a look and maybe do some measurements.
Yeah, historically it's been done manually by very skilled people, but it does have its limitations in that the forest industry would like to run their timber trucks 24/7 and be able to deliver timber around the clock. And then you have to pay people to work around the clock, and that's quite expensive. But the way that Sind does it, they have a portal with cameras that a timber truck drives through, and then you get the images and you can measure. So you can do it around the clock. So it's very efficient.
And I guess there are several portals set up all over Sweden and maybe other countries.
Yeah. They've had great response from the Swedish market, and they have their first international installations now.
And this also touches upon one of my first questions is sort of like, how do you find a need? Well,
well,
and
in
in
this
this case,
case,
how did you find it?
well, this case, it was actually the head of SAAB Ventures, my boss, Roger Persson, that has a background from the paper mill industry. And he knew that about 20 years ago, it was an issue on measuring how much timber they received. So when he joined SAAB Ventures 10 years ago, he started calling around to his old contacts to see, okay, do they still have this problem or challenge? And turns out, yes, they do. So he formed a team with people from the industry to sort of dive down and be able to articulate, okay, what is the core of the problem? What would a proof of concept look like? What would be the minimum viable product that everyone talks about for this industry? So we got that, and then we funded a pilot installation just to test with our technology. Okay, can we do it? And the response was yes. And then we took in entrepreneurs from that industry that worked with the case to get customer contracts to set up the company. And in parallel, we had discussions with potential investors. And then when we saw that, okay, we have customers that are interested in the solution and want to buy it, and we have interested investors, then we started the company. And in the beginning, because a lot of startups, they have to find funding for the technology development, and usually they develop until they're finished, and then they start selling. And then they have to sort of carry the cost of all those engineers until they start getting a cash flow, and the customers might want further development. What we did in this case is that the first developments were done internally within SAAB. So they were sort of the development, the R&D of the company. But as the company has grown and received cash flow, they have started hiring their own engineers and taking over more and more of the development. So it's kind of, it's a very good way to sort of segue.
Yeah, and you I like that. It's kind of like quite a lean approach to
yeah, very lean.
Setting up a startup, and of course, many startups that is sort of like being started by entrepreneurs without money, almost by as a consequence of that. Of course, they are very lean, but also obviously from being a large company and all, I assume that you have a quite a frugal, lean mindset when it comes to setting up new companies, because I guess there's no end to where you how much money a company actually needs if they were just allowed access to it, right?
Yeah, and we try to take everything in stages. So no one likes like an overfunded company, but instead have very tight milestones. Okay, what are we going to achieve? How much funding do you need to to achieve that? And then take the next step and the next step. And
to recapitulate what you said, so you had identified that there was a need, there was an opportunity to apply this technology to an industrial need, and then you brought in two external people, sort of like that that knew that industry. They were also, I guess you already had a sense that they could probably be a decent CEO and a CTO for a company.
Exactly.
And but before sort of like setting up the company, you basically gave them a lot of train and airplane tickets and to travel around to meet with companies. and
well,
and
we're very fortunate that within the wood industry, it's there are enough potential customers in Sweden, so they could drive around in Sweden.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, the primary assignment was just to get those contracts from the customers.
Yeah, get customer
contracts. But there is kind of like a chicken and egg problem here, because they are promising something that the customer need, but they have never seen it before, they have never heard about it before, and hence are not willing to pay up front, right? So you structure this around kind of like a conditional contract, but
Yeah.
there was also a beauty to that, right? Because if I remember correctly, many of the customers, they sort of like could write down what their demands were, so to speak, what this solution needed to solve for them, and maybe the capacity and performance and all that. And so basically you got also a long sheet of sort of like real customer demands from that work.
Yeah, that was a key to get the customer very early on and be very customer focused. And the company has continued to be very customer focused, and that's been one of the success factors. And we knew, because we've done spin-offs before on the image processing, and we had done the proof of concept test locally, we knew that the risk of being able to achieve those requirements was very low. So like you said, yes, it was a conditional contracts we got from the customers, where the deal was that if we could not deliver according to their requirements, they could just rip the contract in half. But we were very confident that we would succeed, and the investors believed in us as well. So then we started the company, brought in external investors, and sort of finalized the product. But that meant that we started a company that had, I think, 4 customers from day one.
Yeah, and so of course those founders and those over well, the future CEO and future CTO, their first job was actually to bring in the customers, or at least some signed conditional contracts. But then also in parallel with that, you sort of like set the stage for the financing. So you were in touch with people knowledgeable about the industry as such. I guess there were at least some business angels as well.
Yeah, we have some business angels, and we got a lot of support from Jönköping Science Park, because we saw that we need a combination of investors and board members that comes from the logistics industry and comes from the timber industry, and we were able to achieve that.
Yeah. So on the investor side, not only did you find a couple of bags with money, but you actually found also people with good knowledge about those industries.
Yeah, and they have been vital for the success of the company. So, and the board that's the best board I've ever been a part of. It's amazing, the discussions we have there.
Yeah, I get the feeling that the whole process sort of like was kind of like a school book example of how this can be done if everything aligns. and also sort of like again, to reiterate, but once you sort of like you have the investors lined up, and then you have the final contract gets signed, the 4th contract, and basically over a night, maybe it wasn't, but basically overnight, sort of like
push the button. No, pretty much overnight. We pushed the button.
You just set up the company, put the money in the bank, and they get on board as the CEO and CTO, and you just start running from there. I think it's super straightforward, but also in that sense also quite an elegant solution that reduces risks for everyone involved. I mean, both the customers, both SAAB as such, but also for the investors. It's not like you're flogging some technology to investors that then will just stand there with it without any market really to apply it to. So
no, being so customer centric really made everything very concrete, and that made it easier.
So can you tell us about any other application areas for this particular technology?
Yeah, one of our latest spin-offs is called wheel scanning. And it actually uses the same technology, basically, but to measure the tread depth of tires. And it's, at least here in Sweden, and I don't know a lot of if this goes international, we have to change our tires, summer tire and winter tire. if it snows or not.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we take it for granted. Maybe it's not granted in all countries, but definitely here in the Nordics for sure.
Yeah, and nowadays a lot of people don't do it themselves. They go into a tire hotel and they have a mechanic change the tire, and then the tire hotel actually stores the tires, washes them, and measures the tread depth to make sure that they're legal for the next season. And that's been done with different types of technologies, but now we have a solution that does it automatically with our stereo imaging.
And that's also quite fun. You go from sort of like measuring timber on trucks towards measuring how much stuff you have on what do you call it, those transports,
pallets,
and then all of a sudden you're measuring the tread depth of tires. It's widely separated application areas, but still basically the same technology. And you actually in this case it wasn't you that sort of like saw that need, but you got approached, right?
No, this is we got approached, and this was again thank you Jönköping Science Park and the business developers there. It's actually one of my former colleagues that works there nowadays, and he has a wide network within that region, and he was in contact with a company that does the washing of the tires, and they saw a need to add on a technology to be able to measure the tire depths and tread depths. So he contacted us because he knew we probably had a solution. So we started talking with that company and did a proof of concept again, very quick and easy. And so yes, we can solve this. And then we started a company together, and yeah, took in an external. We have one employee actually in the company just now, and his only focus is selling.
And also I guess what makes this I guess this is not the end of application areas for this technology, but also when we say technology in this case, it's more or less an algorithm.
Yeah, there are algorithms, and then of course you need to put in a couple of layers to be able to APIs to connect to a different system, but that's just engineering. There's not a great deal of risk in that. Okay, you have to fund a couple of hours to be able to do it, but it's not risky.
And the code as such is more or less being sold as a black box solution to the different companies and for their different application areas. And of course, I guess they could reverse engineer it if they like to. But I think you mentioned
but their focus is to doing, they have a black box in the middle, like the core algorithms, but their focus is usually to do the customer adaptations, the layers outside on that.
And I think also, I'm not sure if I recall correctly now, but a lot of companies have sort of like tried to just copy this solution, but it's not trivial, right? It's not only
not trivial,
high precision, but it's also very fast, right?
Yeah. So a lot of companies do stereo camera, stereo imaging now, and can make it look really good. But the question is, can you do it fast, and can you make it very accurate? And that's where our unique selling point is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there also other technologies that has gotten spun out?
Right now, one of our largest companies called Celine Ship, they use an underwater vehicle from SAAB and puts a washing unit on top of it to wash large container ships to reduce the amount of fouling, biofouling that grows on the ships. And that reduces the amount of fuel that is needed and saves a lot of fuel, and it's good for the environment, of course.
Yeah, and those numbers, they weren't low. It's sort of like corresponding to the whole Sweden
Yeah,
carbon
machine
pollution
that is
from
active.
flying, right? From
yeah,
huge numbers.
The machine in Singapore, just that machine last year, the amount of reduction of carbon dioxide. Here you might need to cut. Vad heter det? Koldioxid.
Yes, carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide, yeah.
Reducement or reduction. Yeah, I think you actually
Celine
nailed
Ship,
it. So.
Yeah, good. So the machine in Singapore, the amount of washings that it did last year amounts to half of the carbon dioxide output from the Swedish domestic flights.
And that's just one machine washing a couple of tankers, right?
Yeah, one machine. And it wasn't fully operational last year. So this year, one machine that is fully operational is the equivalent to all of the domestic flights in Sweden, a normal year in Sweden, not a COVID year.
Yeah, a normal, not a pandemic year. But and the reason why those savings also are so high is that the oil that fuels those big tankers is just a little bit more cleaner than asphalt, basically.
Yeah, it's very dirty. And there are more environmentally friendly fuels for large ships, but on the other hand, those are very expensive. So even if the shipping industry would transfer to more environmentally friendly fuels, they would still have huge monetary savings by keeping their ships clean.
And so this technology is also it makes it easier for the companies to actually maintain those ships and the hulls of them, and thus reducing drag. And this was previously done by people, right? By divers.
Yeah, by divers. And then you have to take the ships off hire because you're not allowed to have divers within the ports. So that's one of the unique selling points as well, as that we don't harm the paint and we can do it inside the port while the bunkering and offloading and unloading is going on with the ship.
Didn't you have some, let's say, minor problems with introducing this technology? Slightly due to the cost of the divers? No.
I think that was connected to another discussion we had, where underwater vehicles for the oil and gas fields, when they first came in and they were starting to use robots, the divers there.
Yeah, and they sort of like those robots, they had mysterious mishaps and malfunctionings, and of course it turned out that it was actually the divers who were the handlers of the robots that
and we were discussing just introducing new technologies to any market. You have to, even though the higher ups or the market is wanting it, there are a lot of power struggles, or there might be people further down that don't want to adopt these new technologies. You have to be very wary of that when you enter a new market. Like, what are the dynamics of that market to be able to get a good entry?
I understand that, and that's also, I think, regardless if you're a investment manager at a large company or if you're just an entrepreneur, those dimensions, like sort of like real practical dimensions in the dynamics there is sort of like very easy to not address or not even see, in the beginning. It's only when they sort of like when the solution meets the reality and the potential users or people that is going to work with it, where that kind of thing shows up.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we do early on, besides just making sure that we actually have a solution that we think will technically work, and we know that there's a market or customer that wants it. The next thing is to look at the value chain and try to understand the dynamics within that value chain. What comes before our solution, what comes after? Because in some cases you might need to ally yourself with someone either upstream or downstream in the value chain. Sometimes they might be such large dominant players that for you to try to fund making an entry into it, it's just going to cost too much. It might be better off selling off the technology to one of the larger players. So that's sort of a thing that we look at. Should we do a tech exit early on, or should we actually build a company and aim for a company exit?
As for what kind of takeaways or advice can you give them to people and companies that would like to do what you guys are doing apparently quite successfully with repurposing their technology in that sense?
If a larger company is interested in doing something like we are, it's making sure that you get the mandate, because you cannot do corporate venture within the processes of a large company, because you are trying to create startups, and startups are a completely different type of entity than a large company. So for example, for us, we have a set mandate for how much we can invest from the SAAB AB board. And then we have our separate investment committee that both has internal people and external people. So we go completely outside of the normal decision-making processes within SAAB. So we can get a decision within 24 hours if we need it. Of course, they prefer if we keep to the scheduled meetings, but if it's needed, we can get it 24 hours. And that is crucial. You have to have the freedom to operate. Otherwise, you will be crushed. And then you have to, again, the large company, you have to sort of think through, why do you want to do it? Is it for strategic purposes? Is it for financial purposes? Do you want to have an external focus or an internal focus? So you sort of have to think that through and then figure, okay, what kind of setup mandate do we need to be able to achieve this? And then also get sort of time to do it. Because a lot of companies start corporate venture units and then they dismantle them within 1 to 3 years.
Why is that?
On average.
Why is that?
Because it takes time to actually show success.
They don't get enough time, basically.
Yeah, they don't get enough time. And we were fortunate early on, when I talked about our history, that we had a couple of early exits that gave us a good financial return.
But
and then it took. Please continue.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to ask, what is sort of like a decent or necessary runway then? Is it 5 years or even longer?
It depends. I mean, normal VC funds, that they ask for money for 10 years. They have a fund lifespan of 10 years, and that is usually what you need. And for us, C3, we did have a couple of smaller exits along the road, but it did take about 10 years to achieve that.
Yeah, so it's really, really important with a long-term perspective, and you got to think like a real VC fund then.
But then when it comes to actually started working with the startups, like we talked about, having a very clear customer focus and making sure that you have customer value at the center is crucial. And then be very honest. What are you good at and what are you not good at? And make sure to bring in what you're not good at. So for us, we know the technology and we know the basics of building a company, but these companies are entering markets and maybe even using business models that SAAB is not used to. We don't have any experience from. And like in the case with Sind, it is crucial to bring in both management, board members, and investors that has that type of experience, because then you are setting yourself up for a much better roadmap.
And you definitely, it looks like sort of like that's your job to set up those companies in that way and find those people.
Yeah, and also then because I have the legal background, make sure that you have agreement that even though people might have a little bit different driving forces and risk willingness and might be afraid of little different things. How do you actually construct agreements where everyone's focus is in the same direction? So you're actually working towards a common goal.
And do you mean with that sort of like aligned incentives as well, or
Yeah, aligned incentives. And when you talk about if you bring in investors, they might be discussions on valuation. Okay, how can you tranche it? How can you put up milestones so it actually reflects? Because we're usually very confident that our technology is going to succeed, and this is. But an outside investors might not have that insight. So then you can always have the milestones. Like, okay, yes, we can reach these requirements. If we don't, then you might be compensated for that.
And is there any other final advice around this, or do our listeners and viewers, do they have now the full recipe of doing this successfully on their own?
No, because there is not one recipe. This is what works for us. And some of the learnings and lessons are general, but some are very specific because this is the type of company we are, this type of management and processes we have. But I would advise anyone that is interested to talk around with different companies that actually do it. But then you have to translate it into, okay, this is what we would like to do, and this is our prerequisites, and then we need this setup.
And maybe also there is also, there can be important aspects also to think about when you as a company acts practically as a VC compared to the to actual VCs in terms of how you get treated, especially maybe with the public funding.
Yeah, we've had a little bit, because all public funding goes from the SME definition that EU has.
Yeah.
And a VC company can own, I think, up to 49.9% of a company, and they're still eligible for public funding. But we're viewed as a large company, and I get that, because a lot of companies or corporate venture are focusing in investing in external companies, startups, with the goal of maybe acquiring them. And public money should not go to fund sort of that roadmap. But we are a venture capital unit focusing on spinning out, just as a corporate venture unit, just as venture capital. But so we've had some issues where our portfolio companies are disqualified from public funding. So that's sort of a message, maybe.
Yeah, at least something
but
worth
we have to find,
thinking about.
Yeah, we have to find other ways.
And apparently you have.
Yeah.
But I'd like to conclude on this thing about looking for challenges, or rather looking for needs. How can you do that? Because it feels like, even for you guys who are like, you're super good at this and been quite successful, still for you it's still kind of like a random process, right? A serendipitous process.
Yeah, it's serendipitous. Fortunately, the serendipity has given us almost enough, more than we can handle. But we have or at least I have a strong feeling that there should be more to be able to be done. So we are always looking for new opportunities, new challenges. If companies out there thinks that we might have a solution to their problem, we're more than willing or very happy to speak with them. I also have this sort of vision that you can use mature technologies from different large companies, either on their own, put into new applications, or in combination with each other to create new solutions. And especially if we are looking at the climate challenge right now. And I love startups, but they start sort of from zero, and they have to mature their technologies. I mean, what what could we do as a nation, as Sweden, if we actually took mature technologies but just applied them to new markets?
I like that. Mature technologies that can be, they're readily deployed. They just need to be adapted to or identified as useful to other application areas, and maybe also maybe combined with other technologies. It's like you have a potentially a very interesting puzzle with a lot of cool pieces there that could be rearranged. That's a great idea, Jenny. I love it. Do you you also let me know beforehand that not only are you welcoming ideas for needs and applications for your technologies, but also you also welcome co-investors, right?
Yeah, so right now we have 8 companies in our portfolio, and we're working on a handful of projects. So we are always looking for investors for our new ventures that we are creating. And we have a good national network, but you can always add on and find new investors.
And is it national? So I mean, Swedish. We're doing this podcast in Sweden, but some of the companies at least are branching out internationally, right? You have international
some of the
customers
companies have international customers, but so far, and I'm thinking right now, now we have mainly Swedish investors, some other large companies, and business angels with domain background.
And if they if someone that sees this and feel that they either have an idea for an application or a need that your technology could be applied to, or if they would like to see if they would like to put money into the investments you have and also future investments, they're welcome to contact you. And I guess they can find you on LinkedIn as probably the easiest.
LinkedIn is probably the easiest, and we also have our own SAAB Ventures profile there. So I just started up this autumn, so I'm trying to be as active as I can with news on our portfolio companies.
That's great.
And also we have, if there are current companies that are active and mature, but they think that maybe SAAB technology could boost their solutions, that could be an interesting combo as well. That's
right. There are so many moving parts here that actually could interact and help with win-win solutions. Jenny, I'd like to thank you for a very interesting discussion. For me, it was super educational. I hope you listeners also found it super educational. And don't hesitate to get in touch with Jenny and SAAB Ventures if you see that there's interesting opportunities there. So thank you again, Jenny, and thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.